Mingbolam.
What's up, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Unplugged podcast presented by the Dance Plug Toronto. My name is Rory Bonozo, and thank you all for joining us today. As most of you know, we are highlighting contemporary dance for the month of September. Before we get into the first of 4 guests this month, here are some events that are happening in the city. Tomorrow, the Moonrunners are celebrating their 10th anniversary. Come out for a night of dance showcases, video premieres, and even artwork at the Combine at 209 Wellington Street West. There's no cover for the event, and its doors open at 8 p.m. Hope to see you there. Also this weekend, Dark Dance Company is having their auditions for their hip-hop and contemporary programs. For more information, you can email them at dark.dance.2010@gmail.com. And on September 11th, Snap and Greg Samba get together for an Afro dance workshop at Dance Tech Center. For more information, you can visit at afro.101 on Instagram. This week, we sat down with the lovely Ming-Bo Lam. She is known first and foremost for her love of dance and the ability to share that passion with all whom she encounters. Her choreography is rooted in her classical foundations, infused with urban and commercial influences, and guided by strong internal dialogue and emotional undertones. Lam graduated with an honors BFA in theater performance dance from Ryerson University as valedictorian. Since graduating, she has crossed the line between classical dance genres and the commercial industry, choreographing for theater productions, Sex Education by Theater, Mixie and the Half-Breeds, produced by Fujin Theater Company, and independent dance projects and commissions, Soul Pepper Theaters, Shen Development Series, The Garage TO, Dance Streams Youth Dance Company, Dark Dance Company. Select performance credits include the Much Music Video Awards and the Toronto Raptors Dance Pack, to name a few. Lam has extensive experience working with dance film. Her work has been featured by Canada's dance magazine, The Dance Current, and her film If You Leave was accepted by both the Toronto International Short Film Festival and the Utah Dance Film Festival. In addition to being faculty at the Underground Dance Center, Lam teaches for Dancing with Parkinson's Canada and is certified by Dance for PD. In our episode, we talk about the benefits of going to an educational institution for dance, contemporary dance as a whole and its misconceptions, and how to stay positive and uplifting through some exhausting and frustrating times. So without further ado, here's
Bo on the Dance Plug TO.
As everyone starts to settle down from the crazy summer season, we also decide to switch over to contemporary dance by highlighting 4 choreographers this month, the first of which being Ming-Bo Lam. Bo, welcome to the show.
I'm doing great. I'm not nervous at all.
I usually start the interview with the same question every single time. So where does your journey in dance begin?
A long time ago, because I'm an old lady. Just kidding. Wasn't that long ago. I started dancing where I grew up in Vancouver Island in a little town called Nanaimo, which actually isn't that little anymore. You may remember Nanaimo from Kiana Smith's little interview. We are from the same hometown. I started dancing when I was 3, but it wasn't really intense. I did like creative movement because my mom just wanted me to explore my musicality and yada yada. And so I started in ballet, and then I started jazz when I was 10 because at my studio, that was the rule. You had to be 10 years old to take jazz. Lots of ballet under your belt first. I loved ballet. I also started doing modern, and I never wanted to do anything else other than dance. It's always been my thing. If you look at my school assignments from back in the day, there are all these little scribbles about wanting to be a dancer when I grew up, wanting to be a choreographer, and I just kept following that forever. So things changed a little bit when I was 12. When I was in grade 8, I auditioned for a pre-professional dance company, and they're contemporary ballet, modern. They're still around. They're called Dance Streams, and it was a once a week group that rehearsed, and the purpose of it was to give you the idea of what it was like working in a professional dance company. So we'd rehearse from, I think, 11 till 5 or 6 every Sunday, and get to work with different choreographers that they'd bring in, which was really cool. It was my first time working with repertoire by really beautiful choreographers like Wen Wei Wang, Joe Lachlan. It was really wonderful. And we also got to tour. So we went to Europe one year and then did smaller tours around British Columbia. So that was really exciting for me because it gave me a taste of what I thought my life might be like as a contemporary dancer, dancing all day, working with choreographers, doing weird moves. And it was great. And so that changed a lot of things for me because it really helped me know how to take my work a little bit more seriously and introduced me to really incredible role models. I started with a company when I was 12 and I did 2 years with them. And the other dancers were as old as 17, 18. So getting to look up to them and learn from them was incredible. I continued my training and then I went to Ryerson University. I graduated from there with a Bachelor of Fine Arts. I could tell you the year, 2011. It was a great year. It's a long time ago. And that was fun too. I know we're going to talk about Ryerson a bit later, I think, so I'll leave that for later. After Ryerson, I actually took a break from dancing. I felt, I think, pretty burnt out, just kind of mentally and physically. I was in a rough place and needed a time out from dancing. I honestly, at that point, didn't think that I was going to keep pursuing it because I just decided I wasn't good enough, and it was crazy to keep pursuing it because you're going to be poor forever and your body's going to be sore forever. And that's if you're good. So I took a break and I took some acting classes. And then I finally started dancing again. A lot of that was because of really good friends at the time who got me back into the studio. And a pivotal point was I had a meeting with an acting agent and to talk about what my options were for that. And I just remember him talking about, all the work I'd need to do if I wanted to be signed. And I thought that was crazy. Like, you're going to put in so much work just to go out and do these auditions and maybe get a job and probably not. And how could you put so much effort into something unless you really loved it more than anything else? And that's when I remembered, oh yeah, I'd do that for dancing. So then I started dancing again. I was really lucky that year. I got to do a Fringe show. It was my first and only time doing Fringe, I think, which is really awesome experience because they have such a long run. I think it's like a full week or more of shows. So that was great. And then at the same time, I auditioned for the Raptors. And so I did my first year with them as well. That was 2012, 2013. And then from that point on, I just kept building and growing and experimenting with what I wanted to do and who I felt I was as an artist. And here I am.
That's awesome. Now, you had mentioned a few people when you were struggling, to kind of find yourself through dance. But what I also want to ask you is, who were some other individuals that played a key role in your development as a dancer?
Definitely all of my early teachers who saw something in me and felt that it was worth enough to encourage me to keep going. My old ballet teachers who would talk to my mom and say, like she's not wasting her time. There's value in this, and there's possibility here to create something bigger and go farther than just here. So all my early teachers for sure, even like a couple of adjudicators who I can't remember their names, which is so bad, but it's probably on a piece of paper back home. And just some of their comments, like the first time I ever won, I didn't grow up doing a lot of competition. We just had one festival in Nanaimo, and it was called the Upper Island Music Festival. And it's still there. I actually got to adjudicate there this past spring. And you'd go there, and it wasn't like comp out here. You don't get trophies. You get like a piece of paper, and it's a certificate. But that certificate meant so much more than like any trophy ever, because it just represented what we'd worked so hard for. And the cool thing about festivals, you got so much feedback from the judges that it really was such an educational experience. And so the first time that I ever like came first, I'll never forget it. It was so special. And I just remember the adjudicator taking the time to look me in the eyes and thank me for my performance. And just something that small just made me think, okay, I have a voice. I have something that someone is willing to listen to as an artist. And maybe maybe this isn't crazy to keep going down this path. So all of those people, someone I would like to name is Marianne McIsaac, who was my first acting teacher ever. And she teaches at Ryerson. And she did a class called, I think it was like audition preparation or something. And it's the first time we ever did monologues and stuff like that. And anyone who was in my grad class and is listening to this will probably laugh, because I went up to do my monologue, and it was a sad monologue, but it wasn't that sad, but I literally stood up there and like was bawling. And to this day, I can just remember Marianne. She was so fierce. She's just such a fierce, strong, badass woman. And she's sitting at the back of the class, and my class is like sitting there staring at me as I'm sobbing. And Marianne's just like, keep going, Bo. Find it in you. Keep going. Push through it, Bo. And I was like, oh my gosh. And just like working with her over time, even though it was a short period of time, helped me feel that I had a lot more strength than I thought I did, and a lot more kind of guts than I thought that I did. I'm like pretty eager student. I always wanted to make my teachers happy, and I was always, kind of timid in a sense. And so to be able to stand in front of people and say something and feel powerful changed a lot of my practice and a lot of how I approach both my work and my life in the long run. A couple other names, David Yee, who is the artistic director of Fujian Theater Company. He's been an incredible mentor to me in terms of helping me learn how to write grants, giving me opportunities to perform and create as part of like kind of under the umbrella of that theater company. If you don't know Fujian, they're Toronto's Asian Canadian theater company, and they do a lot of incredible work. So he's been wonderful. I also had the opportunity to be mentored by Hannah Keel and Jasmine Fife in 2015. And the wisdom and insight that they shared with me throughout that creative process, which I did through the Garage Collective, which is still happening. So if you're a aspiring contemporary choreographer looking to get some cool feedback and work with some beautiful dancers, check them out. Little name drop there. And it really helped to inform my practice and give me a lot of guidelines as to how to work, and especially how to work with a deadline, and to not be afraid to edit your work, to not be afraid to take risks, and to trust your instincts, listen to what you think is right, even if it is a huge shift from what your original vision was. So they were hugely instrumental. And then last but not least, my mom. I just wanted to give her a little shout out because she has stood behind me and beside me for this entire journey. And knowing that she's there believing in me and supporting me any way that she can, and fighting for me and reminding me just how much I love this when I'm questioning it and when I don't know where I'm going or what I'm doing. She's always there to be like, this isn't crazy. I mean, it might be, but you've been doing this for a long time for a reason, and you feel so deeply connected to your work for a reason. And she's there to like love me no matter what happens. So I'm very grateful for that.
That's great. Now, do you always choose Ryerson University as at least as your choice when you decide to, pursue dance on a post-secondary level?
Great question. I actually took a year off after high school. In grade 12, I moved to Vancouver, and I went to a really incredible dance school there called Arts Umbrella, and it was really tough, and I couldn't do it. And I quit. I came back home after I think maybe 3 months and told myself that I was done with dancing, and I took a break. And then it was really hard to come back after that break because my body just wasn't working the way that it used to, and I was in a pretty depressed place. And so kind of rediscovering my relationship with dance was really challenging. And so I took an extra year off after high school just to really solidify where I was and what I wanted, and also to feel like I had the confidence and the courage to move away from home and keep going with it. So I applied to both York and Ryerson. I got into both, but I chose Ryerson because I was able to come out and visit both schools. And I just felt, I loved that Ryerson was downtown. I mean, my whole life I was like, oh, I'm going to live in a big city and be a dancer. So it was so neat to think about Ryerson and being right downtown in that big Toronto core. And I really appreciate, I got to watch a couple of the classes, and I appreciated the work that was happening there. I could see myself there. It's something that I think about a lot, especially when dancers ask me for advice when they're graduating high school and they're not sure where to go or how to get started. I think a big positive for me in terms of moving from Nanaimo to Toronto, I didn't know anything about Toronto. And this was kind of not before the internet, but it was before the internet existed the way that it does today. And so I really didn't have any contacts or any network in Toronto. I wasn't sure how to even begin. And I also, at the time, I envisioned a future in contemporary dance where I'd have this 9-to-5 dance company job and take ballet class in the morning and then rehearse all day and put on my unitard and go on stage. That's what I was kind of imagining, I think. And, which obviously I didn't end up doing. But so for Ryerson, for me, a big part of that was the networking and kind of it served as a stepping stone into the Toronto community. In hindsight, I think there's a lot that can be accomplished without going to a formal education program for dance. I think it's possible to network through drop-in classes and meet and build your own network and build your own work and find your way that way. I think there's a lot has changed since I started at Ryerson in 2007. So I think one of the benefits now is a lot of the programs right now are a lot more well-rounded. They offer more of an understanding about the current state of the dance community. I think there's still a ton of room for improvement. A lot of the things that I wish I learned are like how to be your own business, how to approach your work as an entrepreneur, how to manage your finances, apply for an HST number, how to write off everything. So there's a lot in there that I think can continue to evolve in terms of serving and educating students on what is awaiting them after they graduate. I think I'm rambling a little bit, but that's okay. In terms of, a post-secondary education in dance specifically, it does make it possible for you to go back to school if you're interested in teaching at a university or a college. It makes it, you've already got one chunk of that process done. So you can go back and get your master's, you can go back and do your PhD. So that's really great. It also, it allows you to have that university experience while also doing something that you love and you connect to. I do find also that for me, it was really helpful for my writing skills and that kind of intellectual academic piece of it all, because if you're looking at grant writing and things like that, it is really important to understand and know how to translate what you're thinking and feeling into words that like normal people can understand. So that was helpful for me. But then again, that's also personal because not everyone connects to those things. And I think it's important that people recognize that there is no, I mean, one of the best and also the worst things about this career is that there's no one way to do it. And I used to find that really frustrating because I just wanted some kind of map as to where to get started and what to do. And after you graduate, what do? You go to auditions and cross your fingers and then what, you know, and then what happens after that? Or what if you don't get any of those auditions? And does that make you a failure? Do you need to change courses and all of those things? And so it used to be really scary, but now I actually find, you know, that lack of a blueprint to be incredibly freeing because it gives us so much opportunity to create the kind of career, to do the kind of work that we want to. And there's so many ways in which that can be achieved. And if you look around this incredibly diverse city that we have, you'll see so many artists working. Some of them like to juggle different jobs. Some of them, you know, like to do a bartending thing and then a creative thing during the day. Some people like to be fully immersed in the craft at all times and just in different avenues of it. And then some people have found different balances in other ways. I think it's important to remember that it is pretty tricky to make a living fully as a performer only in this city. So it's incredibly beneficial to have multiple skills and tools that you can pull on to just kind of create more stability with your income. Thank you for translating my thoughts. And so that's helpful, but it's also helpful in terms of, you know, making sure that you don't get stuck, because I think as creatives, we often forget that we need time to recharge and replenish our creative reserves. And if we're constantly approaching our work from one perspective, we can get stuck in that. And it's fun to be able to remind ourselves that there's other ways of looking at it. And I'm really grateful for the fact that my practice is so diverse and that it encompasses performance and choreography and business stuff and teaching. And all of those things help to serve each other.
Would you say that your certification in dance aided in your career at the moment as a working professional?
I feel like it's personal, and I feel like sometimes it does feel that way, and then sometimes it doesn't. And I'm not sure exactly what the reasoning behind that is. I'm grateful for my undergrad. I'm grateful for the privilege of being able to get a degree in something that I care so deeply about, and that's such a big part of me. And I think that my experience at Ryerson has directly impacted the way in which I approach my work now. I'm conscious of creating spaces in rehearsal and in class that I feel are beneficial to learning and don't hinder that by using fear or intimidation. I think it's really important to feel safe where you are and then be able to push your boundaries within a safe environment. I think that it also, because I believed so much of what I was taught, I was really hesitant to branch out of a specific stream of work. Like the creative process that we did a lot was very, it's like concert dance, kind of, I don't know what the word is, maybe like highbrow, contemporary. I might have just made that term up. But I remember we were discouraged from using songs with lyrics to choreograph to, or to do too much work that was facing directly towards the audience. And I recognize, I think that the intention of our instructors was to get people out of that kind of competition mindset and just let them explore and see what other options were available to them. And in that case, it's very positive, and it's really important to be able to do that. But I think I had these ideas so deeply set in my mind that when I started trying to branch out with my own work, I was like, oh no, I can't use that song. It'll be cheesy. It'll be bad. Or like, or say the first year that I did Raptors, I like carried this huge sense of shame with me because I was like, this isn't what I trained for. This isn't what I wanted to do. But then at the same time, part of me was so excited to like be part of this really cool team and learning so much and having a solid contract for a whole year. And so it was a really big learning curve for me to be able to say, you don't have to be one or the other. You can embrace both. Both, pathways have positives and negatives. And at the end of the day, it's all worthy and it's all valid. You just have to learn from it. So again, I went on a huge tangent. But yeah, it has helped me as a working professional in that it's influenced my work and my approach to my work in really strong ways. And it's also helped me learn how to question all of those things that I was taught.
Now, I should have asked this question at the beginning of the podcast, but, as a contemporary dancer and choreographer yourself, for those who don't know what contemporary dance is, can you describe what the style is? And are there any different subgenres that fall into the category of contemporary dance?
Sure. Okay. Let me preface this by saying that I'm currently running a series of workshops called Bo's Basics, and it's an introduction to contemporary dance. And for the people who did it in June, I created a little introductory workbook, not workbook, just a little introductory book. And I did a bunch of research on contemporary dance because I wanted to say, hey, this is what you're signing up for. You should know what you're getting into. And it kind of my research confirmed what I believe to be about contemporary dance, but I'm going to make sure this is my opinion and it's not the be all end all. But currently the working definition of contemporary dance is just a topic of discussion within the community. There isn't one singular definition of contemporary dance. There's people who believe it to be a point of evolution out of, let's see, so we started with classical ballet, and then then modern dance rejected those principles through the creation of modern dance. You're looking at Martha Graham, Jose Limon, and then through that, contemporary dance kind of rejected those principles and took it in yet another direction. These days, that's one theory. And then these days, there's also the commercial, competitive, contemporary dance thing where Mia Michaels, I think, was the first person to refer to this genre of contemporary dance. And it kind of ended up being anything that was done in bare feet. And I think a concern for a lot of people right now is that what people question a lot is contemporary seems to be this gigantic umbrella that we're putting all of these random dance styles under. And people question if that's a good thing or a bad thing, because it's good in that it creates so much room for organic movement and creativity and personal styles and interpretations, but it's maybe a negative in that it's such a wide range. How do you define what that is? And do you need to? In a setting like in the setting of a competition, you need to have some guidelines and boundaries as to what defines contemporary dance, because otherwise, who's going to win? And how do you know whether they're a winner of contemporary dance? And then in, the grander scheme of, say, professional dance, is it important to know that? What are these labels for? Do they inform how we teach the craft? Yes. I personally believe that ballet foundations are really important in contemporary, primarily because of the safety of the body and the alignment that's required. If you are doing contemporary dance where there's any sort of floor work involved or jumps or turns in the broadest sense, you need to understand how to transfer the weight. You need to understand how to safely transition from standing to the floor. You need to understand how to engage your core and be strong in the right places in your body so that you're not going to risk injury. So for me, ballet foundations are really important. But then so is a general understanding of modern, and your understanding of like fall and release and contraction. All of those elements play into what we currently call contemporary as well. But then you've got these like urban contemporary genres, or people who, these days I think so many people train in so many different styles, and then they're just moving to music. What do you call that? Is that creative movement? How hip-hoppy does it need? Hip-hoppy, that's not a word, sorry. But what are the guidelines that define, and where are the boundaries or the borders between these different genres? I think it's just a huge conversation piece. But for me, contemporary dance includes foundations in ballet, an understanding of modern dance, and I think in a lot of concert dance these days, there's also a lot of experimentation happening with mixed media. So theater, film, spoken word, live music, percussion, body percussion. There's so much room and a ton of experimentation happening. So it's really exciting, but it's an ongoing conversation.
Now I want to talk about two specific subgenres that you had spoken about. But do you think there is a difference between the commercial contemporary and theater and just contemporary? And where do you fall into?
Okay, in my very personal opinion, the differences that I see as someone watching contemporary dance, for example, I judge dance competitions. And then a couple years ago, I was on the Dora jury judging professional dance in Toronto. And so I've seen quite a wide range of contemporary dance. And when I look at commercialized competitive dance, I see some certain trends, like the willingness to utilize say more kind of showy, entertaining tricks. Like if the dancers have acro skills, those are sometimes incorporated. I think there's a lot of there's kind of not in all of it, but there's this sense that contemporary has a certain feeling to it, a huge emotional component to it. And I don't mean any of this in like a good or bad way, but just some trends that I've observed. So there's like a big emotional component, and that expression is important. And then, room for kind of more tricks and entertainment. And I think there's maybe there's a larger or a greater sense of importance is placed on the awareness of the audience. Again, not in a good or bad way, but just that the dancer and the choreographer is aware that this contemporary piece is meant to engage with the audience, and I guess entertain them. Whereas on the flip side, I think the work really centers in on the intention of the choreographer. And there is most often still a very strong awareness of the audience and awareness that it's a performance piece, but the heart of it, the intention, drives it all forward. And now I'm saying this and I'm like, but so many people in the commercial side of things would still feel the same way. They would still feel that intention is the heart of what they're doing. So I don't know, maybe I take back everything I just said. There is a distinction, there's a difference, but I don't know if I can put my finger on exactly what it is.
Why do you think it is more difficult to interpret contemporary dance compared to other styles of dance? And the reason why I'm asking this question is, I guess, based on my experience watching different contemporary shows, some might find it difficult if you're not provided with like at least a preface of, what the piece entails. Not to say that it's obviously necessary, but at least based on my experience, why do you think someone can find it difficult to interpret contemporary dance?
Well, I think the first thing is that I don't believe that you always need to understand what's happening. And I think my perspective on contemporary dance is that it's abstract and it's organic in nature. And just as you would walk through an art gallery and see, say, a painting of a person, and you're like, oh, that is a person. Great. And then you keep walking, and then there's a painting, and it's just colors and textures, and it evokes a feeling, but it may or may not necessarily tell a specific story. And I think that when I look at contemporary dance, I try to approach it in the same way, in that you don't necessarily need to understand it or make sense of it in order to feel something and get something from that performance. So my advice, although you did not ask for my advice, but I'm going to give it to you, is to try to go in without a need to understand and just witness. And when I watch contemporary dance, I get excited by the relationships between the dancers on stage, by the chemistry between them, by the ways in which that they're moving. How are they? I question the creative process. What is it that inspired this trajectory of events and movements? What is it that the choreographer is trying to communicate by repeating this section 5 times? See if you can ask questions and be okay with not necessarily having the answers. I think it's tricky to understand contemporary dance in the same way because many contemporary choreographers, the fun lies in the dissection of this original idea. So we might start with a concept, and through the development of the piece, it can take on an entirely new life. So A, that's fun, and B, it might end up looking or being perceived very different from what the original intention was. And so sometimes, you can look at those program notes and say, oh, that makes sense. I feel this sense of loss. I might not see a specific story of loss, but I feel it. Because the other thing that I believe is that all dance is, it's body language, but magnified. And we use technique as a tool in which to magnify what we're trying to say through our bodies. And so genres simply serve as different tools. And in contemporary, we have the freedom to play with organic movement, and then that just creates so much opportunity for interpretation. But that's also cool because you can show the same piece to like 5 different people, and depending on where each person is in their life, what they're experiencing, what they're going through, they might see or feel something totally different. They might even see or feel something totally different than the choreographer. But I think the magic is when you feel what the choreographer's intention was, even if you don't understand it. Yeah.
Now, one thing a lot of people don't know is that you obviously cast dancers for, several jobs. But when you do put out a casting call for contemporary dancers, what are you looking for in their video links or resume? And what aspects do you look for, especially from people who you've obviously never worked with before?
Okay, well, in terms of logistics, don't send a video file that needs to be downloaded. Never, ever do that unless they specify. Send a link. It can be a private link with a password, Vimeo, YouTube. Send something that we can click on and check it out. For me, it does not need to be longer than a minute and a half. I'm looking for a certain type of movement quality. I'm looking for, movement quality, movement expression through movement. It's really hard, and I think all choreographers understand that it's so hard to cast someone without having worked with them or without having met them in person. So in a dream world, we would have more auditions, and I think a lot of times we don't because timelines, because finances, because we're hustling. And I used to hate this. When I graduated Ryerson, I just remember being so angry that I then needed to, after, spending all this money and putting in all these years and all these hours, I needed to keep going to class just to meet people and hope that they would hire me. Because I was like, I have a piece of paper that was really expensive and it says I can dance. So just give me a job. But it's okay. The world doesn't work like that. And it's true. Like, now I understand the other side, because you do need to understand not just, for me, for my creative process, it's very collaborative. So I need to understand not just, you can be like the best, most amazing dancer ever, but if you aren't able to play with my concepts and ideas in a way that makes sense for both of us, then it's not going to work. And then I need to also know that you're someone that I can work well with in the space. Things like ego and, kind of a defensiveness that doesn't work well with me and my method of creation. I think, in situations where a piece is being set and the choreography is prepared in advance and you're going in, you're setting the moves, you're setting formations, you go, that, you can work with different people within that. But when you're working in like an extended creative process where there's a lot of play and exploration and tasks, you need to know that what you see in your mind can be brought to life by the dancers that you are working with. So again, I'm looking for a type of movement quality. I often feel like I'm looking for a sense of maturity as well. I'm looking for people who feel confident in what they have to offer, and are willing to just experiment and be open. I also sometimes find if I don't know people well, I will ask for references, or I'll reach out to peers in the community and say, have you worked with this person? Are they cool? And I also find it helpful. What was I going to say? I find it helpful. Looking at their training. So when I look at a CV, I want to see who you've worked with, what training you've done. If I see someone's been to Springboard, I know that they're at a certain standard. And now, for the record, I've never been to Springboard. So it's not like I'm going to not work with people who haven't, but seeing who you've worked with and the type of training that you've had will help me to understand your experience with different creative processes as well.
Where do you think jobs are in commercial contemporary dance?
I don't know, but I think that there's a lot more opportunity for commercial contemporary dance than, say, 20 years ago. I think So You Think You Can Dance played a huge role in that, because now people know what it is. They know that term. And they have, a concept of what that looks like. Even if it's not all of it, they have an understanding of what it is and that it's a thing at all. So I think that's positive. I think it's really cool seeing contemporary dance included in things like artist performances, say at the Video Music Awards, or music videos. I think that's really exciting and cool. I think that we can continue to do better to elevate contemporary dance, commercial or otherwise, onto a larger stage. How? I don't know. But I think we're doing a good job at, I love, through my experience teaching drop-in classes to beginners, I'm blown away every week by how many people come out to try contemporary dance, because I know that sounds really intimidating to a lot of people. Does it mean I need to be super flexible? Do I have to be able to turn? How do I point my toes? All these questions. I know it can be a really intimidating genre of dance. So I'm always so impressed by everyone who comes out to dance. And I think that has a huge benefit to us as artists, because if people are interested in learning it, the more people who are learning it, who are engaging with it, the more people are likely to go and see a live performance. And I think the missing link is, right now we have so much accessible, beautiful dance on Instagram and Facebook and YouTube. How do we get people into the theater, because it is such a different experience when you sit and see something live. And there's so much incredible contemporary dance happening in this city, and there's so many artists working so hard, and they deserve to be seen live. So I think if I can send out a call through this podcast into your ears, go and see a contemporary dance show. If you want a recommendation, shoot me a DM. You can tell me things you like, things you don't like, and I will give you a suggestion of a company you might connect with. I know some of it's really weird, and that's okay. You don't have to like all of it, but it's also important to see work that makes you feel uncomfortable. And it's important to question, why do I feel uncomfortable? And is what is making me feel weird? Is it because the dancers are naked? Maybe. Is it because there's no music? Maybe. What is it and why? And then okay, maybe you don't like that. Go see a different one. There's so much happening, and a lot of it is really, really cool. So I think if the more people who are able to get out to see shows, the higher demand will be for performance, and then the more funding there will be, and then we can make more dance shows. Obviously not that easy, but there we go.
Now, I love this next question coming in. Do you believe in performance over technique, or vice versa?
I believe that it is within someone's performance that you feel something that technique will never be able to give you. But I do not believe that one is more important than the other when it comes to training. I think that I've heard some teachers say, oh, like, you know, these dancers aren't technicians. They're never going to be technicians. So we're just going to focus on performance. And I think that does dancers a disservice, because technique is important. It is like I said before, one of the tools that we use to best express ourselves and what we have to say and what we're trying to communicate. So it is through that technique, and technique doesn't need to be 5 pirouettes. It doesn't need to be flips and leaps. It just needs to be a strong understanding of how the body works and how to move through space that allows you to share what you're trying to say in the best way possible. And I think also that there is technique. I mean, I think the two are really interrelated. You need both, and both of them can be manifested in different ways in terms of live performance. But I do think, you know, that magic piece, like that it factor, that I don't even know if I'd necessarily categorize that as performance. It's that piece that can't be taught. And it's that moment when you are so perfectly in sync with and immersed in what you are doing that the audience is right there with you, and they are feeling what you're feeling, and they are living what you're living. And that's what we should all be aiming for. And that comes with experience, and that comes with dedication, and that comes through the practice of your craft. And I know people have touched on this in other interviews with you. Like, I think, you know, we are part of a generation that wants the success so badly and wants to be what we see ahead of us so badly. And I recognize that, because when I graduated, I was like, or when I tried to dance again, I was like, okay, I'm just going to give myself 3 years. And if things aren't working the way I want them to be in 3 years, I'm done. I'm done forever. But you can't really set a timeline on it, because you got to invest what you want out of it. And you need to invest in, and you need to learn how to love the part that sucks. You need to learn how to love the work. You need to learn how to love going into the studio when every muscle is so sore and you're so tired and you hate dancing. You need to learn how to keep going through that, and how to work through the parts where you don't want to do it. And I think that's what builds good technique and good performance.
Now, I think we can both agree that the world can be very exhausting sometimes. But based on my experience, when I look or when I think of Ming-Bo Lam, I think of someone who's always smiling. I think of someone who is very bubbly, has a great personality, and is just so caring. But what I do want to ask you is, what keeps you so positive and uplifting?
I mean, my first instinct with that question is that I'm not. I mean, anyone who's people who are close to me know that it's been a pretty rough couple of years, and I mean, therapy helps. But at the end of the day, I think it's not necessarily a choice. Like I've always just been a pretty happy person. I love life, and I really genuinely love dancing. And I know that's like so cheesy, and it was doodled all over all of my notebooks as a kid. And it was like my first email address was love_to dance_forever. So it's really been a part of me since day one. And I, even at like the worst moments, especially over maybe like the past year, I mean, when I'm teaching, I don't have a choice. That's my responsibility. My job is to give people what they came for. It's like performing in a sense, right? And so you learn how to place those things outside of the studio and bring your best self to the floor. And I've been really lucky that, I guess just because I love dance so much, like once the music's on and I'm there, I'm not thinking about anything else. I'm thinking about my students. I'm focused on them. I'm thinking about the work that we have to do that day. And I'm right there in it with them. And so I guess what keeps me happy and positive? Hope. I have a lot of hope. I know that there's a lot going on in the world that I'm not able to directly impact necessarily. I mean, I can't go to the Amazon and put out that fire. I mean, I could try, and I can't. Well, there's just a big list there. But what I can do is I can take care of myself and make sure that I am my healthiest self. And then with that, I can take care of those around me, and I can take care of my students, and I can take care of my work. And through that, it's a ripple effect. So I have hope for the world. I know there's a lot of people who I think it's really easy. And let me also say, this is probably also, I come from a lot of privilege. I am a very privileged person. And so I have the privilege of hope, and I have the privilege of understanding that change is possible. And not everyone grows up like that. So I have hope. And I believe that things will get better if we keep learning how to be better, and we keep educating ourselves, and we keep sharing that information, like on your amazing podcast where we get to listen to everyone's thoughts. And I believe in my capacity to affect positive change within my own life and my own sphere. And I believe that by doing so, greater change will happen.
Oh, that's great. What advice would you give to someone who's afraid to be vulnerable through dance?
First of all, if whoever asked this question, did you ask this question? No. Okay. Whoever asked this question, check out Brene Brown. She is the bomb, and she's got a ton of books. I read all of them. She also has TED Talks if you're not like a reading person. And she writes a lot. She researches vulnerability and writes about how vulnerability requires courage. And I think that relates directly to this, because we are afraid of being vulnerable because we're afraid. Because being vulnerable means opening ourselves up to criticism and judgment. It means, and I get it, I am also afraid to be vulnerable when I'm dancing, but my interpretation of vulnerable might be different from yours. I'm not afraid of letting someone see my sadness. I'm not afraid of having someone see me cry. I am afraid of someone seeing me, I don't know, fall flat on my face. I don't know, maybe not even. I'm less scared these days. But for a long time, I was definitely afraid of not being perfect. And that fear of not being perfect made me hold back so much that I stopped myself from even trying to be better. And so I think my advice that I would give you is to hone in on what your intention is and also to practice. So think about when, say you're trying to be vulnerable with a certain concept or a certain dance, what are you saying? If you put all of your effort into saying what you need to communicate through your movement, so much of that will be taken care of on its own because you are simply doing the task at hand. And if that task requires you to be vulnerable, it's going to happen. Practice alone, practice sharing your work with one person, two people that you trust, people that you know are there to support you and not there to critique or judge you. And then remember that and take that with you when you go into class, when you go into performance. Remember that you are worthy as an artist without other people's approval. You don't need external validation to have worthiness as an artist. We all have something to say. We all have something to offer. And if you can allow yourself to focus on the work, and by the work, I mean doing your thing, your craft, your dancing, then the rest of it doesn't really matter. So find your intention, practice, and trust yourself. Trust that what you have to share is valid. And trust that people will respect what you have to share. And if they don't, that's on them. That's not on you. If you put yourself out there and you're being vulnerable and sharing something that's hard and someone laughs or, I don't know, I'm going to say gives you a put down, that's on them. And you have to recognize that that's coming from their own insecurities. And that's probably coming from a deep down feeling of, oh my God, I could never do that, because that is terrifying. And so let that be on them and then keep going as you.
Now we're at the home stretch. And I asked this question to all my guests on the podcast, but if you could give your younger self any advice, what would it be?
To trust myself more. I think so much of my training was consumed by doubt of like looking in the mirror and knowing that that my body was different from the dancers around me. I was thicker and my knees don't stretch and my feet aren't great and yada, 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 yada. And so much of my training was looking in the mirror and saying to myself what was wrong and saying what I would never be and saying things that I couldn't change. Whereas I wish that I'd had the ability to trust myself, that I was where I needed to be, and to trust that I was capable of doing what I wanted to do. I really loved Shavar's advice as well, I think, which was to be fearless and to move through the world with more courage. And that really resonated with me too, because I think that's another big part of it, is like how much of my training was fear, driven by fear of like, oh, I don't want to, I don't know, challenge myself by standing in the front line at this audition because what if I mess up? But what if you mess up? What's going to happen? You're going to feel crummy and might have a little cry, and then you're going to try again. And at the end of the day, if you trust yourself, you know more than you think you do. And if you don't, then you'll figure it out and you'll get that knowledge. And I mean, it's like your teachers say all the time, dance big, dance full out, because it's only in doing so that you're able to really understand and see where it is that you're lacking and what you need to change and what you need to work on. If you're, half-assing everything and, not going fully, you're never going to know. It's always going to be just a maybe. So if you go for a full out yes, then you'll know better.
The last question I have for you, is there any new and exciting news that you'd like to share? What's next in Bo's journey?
Okay, well, a couple things that I can't really talk about yet. So I'll just leave that as a little teaser tidbit. And then the thing that I can talk about is Bo's Basics Round 2. We start in 2 weeks. So I've got a beginner session and an intermediate session. There's a couple of spots left in both of them. So if you're interested in learning more about contemporary dance with me and some really wonderful fellow dancers, you can check out my website, mingbolam.com. And under classes, you'll find all the information there. It's 6 weeks. It's really fun. You get a video at the end of it. And it's good times.
Well, that concludes our round of questioning.
Woo-hoo!
Again, Bo, thanks for being on the show. Did you want to drop your socials for anyone who might be interested in following your journey?
Sure. Instagram is love.mingbo. Mingbo. And that's it. I mean, I don't think anyone really uses Facebook.
How about website?
Website, mingbolam.com. Mingbolam.
That's great. Well, everyone, thank you again for listening to Bo's episode. This was episode 25 of the Unplugged podcast. Again, my name is Roy Urbanozo. You can follow us at the DancePlugTO on Instagram. And wherever you guys are listening from, make sure to hit that subscribe button and leave us a review. Feel free to continue the conversation with Bo by sending her a message, or and let us know your thoughts on the episode by sharing a post on Instagram and by tagging us at the DancePlugTO. We hope you enjoyed this first episode of 4 in our contemporary series for the month of September, and we look forward to having 3 other guests on the show. Until that time, this is Roy signing off on the Unplugged podcast, and we will see you guys next week.